The Industrial Revolution started in England or Britain more generally in the late 18th century. It spreads to the continent after the Napoleonic Wars died down at the beginning of the 19th century. By the mid 19th century, it had reached Asia. And it's profoundly disruptive to traditional societies whose traditional security paradigms no longer work when they're facing the weaponry of the industrialized age coming at them. And what the Industrial Revolution does and why it's so revolutionary is it produces compounded economic growth. Traditional societies are pretty stable. But when you do compounding economic growth, the difference in power and wealth becomes stark between those who do and those who don't. And it's also based not only on technological changes, right, whether you've got all these fancy armaments and railways and telegraphs, but it's also based on institutions. What are institutions? They're how we organize each other. So when you think of institutions, you think of the buildings where people are, but that's not it. It's the people in there who are working on a shared project together, whatever, or a shared area of activity. And this is one of the hallmarks of Western civilization. This is what the Romans figured out of institutions and laws, that this is a way of really harnessing people, and it's profoundly powerful. So I'll go into all of that. So Japan's looking at the world with this incoming industrial revolution or the powers that have benefited from it, and it's watching its neighbor China being defeated twice in war, and they're horrified, not just appalled. And so they're looking at it and going, you know what, maybe we'll be next. And they're right. The United States does unto Japan what Britain and France did unto China. What's that? The treaty port system. What it meant is that trade in Japan and China would take place in designated treaty ports, that the West would set tariffs on this trade, and that Western citizens in China or Japan would, in these treaty ports, would not be subjected to Chinese or Japanese law, but home country law. And when Chinese and Japanese citizens were in Europe and the United States, they most certainly were not dealing with home country law. They were dealing with US or Western law. So it was not reciprocal in any way. In addition, each one of these treaties had a most favored nation clause in it, which said the one who's negotiating this treaty, the most favored one, whatever they negotiate will be given to everybody else. So it meant whatever one could negotiate accrued to them all. It meant that China lost sovereignty and Japan lost their sovereignty when these treaties go in. And so the Japanese, unlike China, which fights war after war with these Westerners trying to defeat them militarily and it's unsuccessful, the Japanese say, whoa, 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 whoa. We're going to assess what the nature of the problem is. And they sent fact-finding mission after fact-finding mission to Europe primarily, but also the United States. This is just the most famous one, the Iwakura mission, which is off to the west in the United States as well in 1871. And they're studying not only Western military institutions, but a whole array of political, economic, legal, social, educational, the works, to understand the basis for Western power and the problem that is hitting them. And they arrive in Europe at a really interesting time. It's when Otto von Bismarck is just finishing up the Third War of the unification of the Germanic states. And the Japanese think, ooh, this might be quite a model for us. Why? Because Prussia transformed itself over a succession of 3 wars from the weakest of the 5 great European powers to second only to Great Britain. And it did so in part by unifying the Germanic states into modern Germany. And the Japanese are thinking, wow, this might be relevant to us because we're divided up into all these feudal domains that we have just tried to glue together. And what are the lessons to be learned here? And as they're thinking about this and watching what Bismarck is up to, they come upon thinking about institutions and technology. And modernization, I'm going to use the words in the following sense. Modernization means adopting the most state-of-the-art technology, whatever it is, not just military technology, but all manner of technology. And Westernization, the way I'm going to use it, means adopting Westernized institutions. And I don't mean just military institutions, I mean everything, from whether you Westernize your educational institutions or political, whatever it is. And the question is, Can you have one without the other? Can you modernize and have all the fancy gadgets and things without having the westernized institutions that the societies that created these things had? And if you think about it, this dichotomy is still with us. There are a lot of fighters in the Middle East and North Africa who are more than happy to use state of the art technology. But the last thing they want is westernized institutions. And the Japanese, when they posed this question back in the day, asking whether you can have one without the other, they decided the answer was no. They didn't particularly like Western culture, but they believed that in order to have uh, to not only use and import state-of-the-art technology, but become an independent producer of it, you've got to do some degree of Westernization.
If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch the full episode here and subscribe for more clips. Thanks.